Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Edmonds This Week. I am Alicia Crank and an Edmonds resident. This is the last time for a while I get to talk about the special election that we had here in Edmonds for the RFA. We just had it this past Tuesday, and it passed. The yes vote was, as of Saturday, 8,466 people voted yes, while 5,101 people voted no. So that is a 62.4% for yes and 37.6% for no. The total turnout percentage is just at 43%, so 42.87. That is a significant number when you go back and look at the numbers from previous special elections and even the regular elections. Let's do regular first. So back in 2019, when we talk about city council and mayoral elections, in 2019, the turnout was 56.82%. And it's one of the highest in the county, to be honest. Even though you're like, that's just over 50%. We should have a higher percentage. We should. But that is where we are. In 2021, it dropped a little bit to 50.92. And in 2023, it was 51.84. So it ticked back up a little bit. But let's talk special election. Can I just say, Edmonds loves a special election. I didn't realize this. As someone who's lived here for almost 11 years, I didn't realize how many special elections that we've had. And they've been centered around the Edmonds School District. So, let me give you those numbers. We're just going to go back to 2020. In 2020, the turnout was 31.24%. In 2021, a year later, that special election was 30.85% turnout. And in 2022, 31.31%. And in 2023, told you we love a special election, 31.72. So even at the highest, which was 31.72 just a couple of years ago, we are already at 42.87 for this special election. So to say that Edmonds has gotten activated is not an exaggeration. This is also a major election year because, as you probably saw from the other or heard from the other regular election percentage numbers, it was 2019, 21-20, 21-23, and now we're in 2025. So in Snohomish County, period, there's going to be over 180 spots to be filled, numerous in each city, county situation, but 185. And 3 are Edmonds City Council, and 2 are Edmonds School Board. So this is going to be a very heavy election year. It already is. People are starting to pay a bit more attention because what happened with this special election, because it went beyond just what was going on with the RFA. It called into question some of the leadership of our elected leaders. Some have been super supportive. Some have not felt like city leadership has done that great of a job. So there is going to be a push. And filing week is coming up. So the week of May 5th through 9th is when someone can go online and sign up to run for a particular office. A lot of those fees are zero because some of those roles are not compensated either. But other ones, there is a filing fee based on the role and whatever compensation you might get in being in that role. So I want to say to run for city council is about $218, I think is the filing fee. I could be wrong, but you can go visit Snohomish County Elections and it will give you that whole breakdown. So, what are we going to do? Like I said, a lot of people have started to think about what elected office looks like. What does it even mean? Is it worth their time? Do they want to be involved in this process? Well, I would say that we are all involved in the process, whether we're running for office or not. So I want to talk advocacy. Now, with advocacy, I will say it means different things to different people. And sometimes people come off very heavy-handed in the name of advocacy. And some can be very light and really not focused, also in the name of advocacy. I want to share these 13 tips. And I'm taking this from someone that I truly admire and respect as a public official down in the Bay Area. His name is Joe Simitian. Now, Joe has just retired after 41 years of serving the public in some capacity, whether he started with school board, then there was city council, then he was a county supervisor, which kind of up here translates to the county council, and kind of went back and forth in a lot of those different roles. And when I lived in the Bay Area and ran a program called Leadership Mountain View, we would have a government day, and he would always come to it and do these 13 tips. So I'm going to talk through them, but I'm not going to do them any justice, because the way that Mr. Simitian would do and perform, and it is a performance, these 13 tips is a master class on how to engage people when you're trying to teach them something. So I actually found video from another group that he did this with. Like I said, it's a very popular thing that he would do across the county, and frankly, probably across the state. That was super impactful, and he would bring you in as he talks through these 13 tips. So I'm going to share them, but then at the end of this, I am going to add the video that I was able to find with him doing the 13 tips and seeing how he interacts. And I do think that it is worth your time, if you are someone who is about advocacy, to watch it and see how it's done and how he talks about it, and see how it brings you in, and hopefully we can do that with each other going forward. So with that, I'm going to go into these 13 tips. And like I said, I'm going to share the video that talks about it as well. So in his tips, the very first one is to develop a relationship before you arrive. Now, you could have known the person that you're trying to advocate to, the city council member, the mayor, the county council member. Maybe you've known them for a few years. Maybe you've only gotten to know them for 15 minutes through a phone call. Just start to establish a connection. If that's possible. That's not always possible, especially if it's a last minute issue that has come up and you're trying to, do something about it. So you don't necessarily have the luxury of time. But if you do, and if there's something that's a bit more longer forming, being able to create a relationship, or start to develop one at least, is a good way to start off your advocacy. The second is understanding what motivates your audience. So your audience might be the council member, it might be the mayor, and it actually might be their staff person. And that is super important. And we'll talk about that as we get lower into the list. But again, understand what motivates that person or that audience, and tell them why you care. Care. Not angry or upset, but why you care. Third is understand what's possible and what's not. Now, I will give it to you, Edmonds. Some of you are sleuths. You are doing all kinds of research, as proven through this RFA situation. So you know what you're doing. You know when to go find the facts when you want to find the facts. And you also can tell from that what your ask can be. Is your ask something that can be formulated and done, or is it asking for the impossible, and thus you're never going to get the right answer? Number 4 is finding a floor manager. Now this is important, especially if you're going before council, before some governing legislative body, and you have what we call, the 3 minutes for the public to be able to share what they want to share. Now, again, sometimes it's great when you have 100 people there to advocate for something that you believe in as well. But a floor manager should kind of help differentiate that message. If it's 100 people saying the exact same thing, at some point it might get tuned out. But if each person or each group is coming with some different aspect to the advocacy, you have a lot more opportunity to make sure that the point gets across, and that they're hearing you, and that they're listening. Number 5 is the Joe Jackson principle. Tell them what you want. Just be specific. Just go right into it. You don't have to do a lot of storytelling. You don't have to talk around the bush. way too much to get to your point, especially if there's 99 other people waiting to talk after you. Get to what you want to say. Get to the point. Number 6. Now, this one can sometimes be a little hard. But number 6 talks about bring solutions, not problems. We're easily able to point out the problem. But if we can come with a solution in what we're advocating for, it makes it a lot harder for them to say no, especially if it's a feasible solution. If it's something that shows that it was thought about, that it was conceived, it was vetted in some way, and say, this could possibly be a solution for what it is that we want to do. Now, on top of that is number 7, which is describe the elements of the solution rather than insist on it. So you can say, hey, and there's a lot of us in this town that's like this. Say, you should do this because this is why I think this is why I think you should do this, but not necessarily say the why or kind of break it down. What are the elements of this solution? What does it take to get to that ultimate solution? Number 8. This is another one that can be sometimes a little hard, especially in our current political community climate, which is do not chastise, insult, or threaten the council member, the elected official, or their staff. Don't. Just don't. You don't like it when someone does it to you, so don't do it to them. Number 9, understand that less is more. So again, I can go back to that example of the 100 people standing there, is that if you're all going to say the same thing, do you really need all 100 people to say it? They can be there. But do they need to say it, or is it just going to get lost amongst those that you're trying to convince as part of your advocacy? Layer your campaign is number 10. So, especially with the RFA stuff, there were so many different elements. And I think, personally, some people kind of got lost and confused about which way they wanted to vote because there were so many aspects coming at the same time. There was some messaging that got lost in the shuffle. I'll say with the No campaign, for example, I talked about this a couple of podcasts ago. The no was really pause, not no. But by the time the language started to change to talk about, hey, it's really about pausing, you had already had a lot of people going, wait, I thought this was no. What is pause? And where does that even come out to? So being able to layer how you're communicating your message and how you're trying to win over other people as part of your advocacy is really important. Number 11, persistence pays off. Some of you have been very persistent, especially with what's going on with the trees and Hummingbird Hill Park and, and the RFA and what's going to be coming down the line in the future with the comp plan. It's going to take persistence. But that's also going to mean that you have to kind of stay in the realm of what's happening. It's easy to tap out after a while, especially if you overexert yourself in the very beginning. And I've seen some of you already talk about on social media, like you're ready to sleep for a week because this took so much out of you. Again, if you're layering and kind of spreading that out and having a good floor manager that can kind of help manage all these things, then hopefully you won't get as tuckered out as some of you have, and will help you to stay persistent. Number 12, and this was my favorite. I employ this in the workplace with anyone that I work with, that I'm on a committee with. Like, make it easy to say yes. Put enough example or solution and example to how the solution could work to make it hard for that person you're trying to convince to say no. They won't say no if you give them viable options. If you break it down and kind of say, okay, it's hard for me to say no to this, if they've come up with some great avenues to at least start the conversation for reconsideration, if that's what they're doing. So again, make it easy to say yes. And then finally, number 13 is the value of a thank you. Again, that thank you can be direct to that person. The thank you can be, frankly, to their staff. Because again, when you're trying to get a hold of an elected official, when you're trying to get on their calendar, the person you need to be the nicest to, frankly, is the person that controls that calendar. the person that decides what pieces of mail goes in front of them in priority. So thank you is a good thing. And sometimes even a public thank you is even better, meaning doing it through a letter to the editor, something on social media that just says thank you, even if it wasn't the complete solution that you were looking for. So again, those are those 13 tips. That is my summary of it. But like I said, at the end of this, I'm adding the video of Joe Simitian talking through these 13 tips and doing it as this masterclass on how to do it. So please watch it. Take out some time. Really, and even watch it as a group. Keep Edmonds vibrant, Edmonds activated, different groups that are trying to do advocacy. Watch it and see. I would love to hear your feedback on what you think about it. So with that, I am going to end this week's Edmonds This Week. And next week, I'm actually going to talk about some of the offices that are up for election that might be of interest to those here in Edmonds. And it's not just about the city council seats. So until then, have a wonderful week. Stay strong and stay activated.
Thank you for including me. Do you all have a copy of the handout? Because this is going to be key to the conversation we're going to have tonight. And I use the word conversation quite purposefully because, as you'll see in a minute, it's going to be interactive. And I'm going to ask you to just kind of role play along with me a little bit, go with it. If I assign a role to you that doesn't sound like it's really you, just help me out a little if you would. And what we're going to do in the next hour or so is try and bring all of our skills up a notch in terms of our ability to be effective advocates, principally, although not exclusively, in working with government at every level. And I think it may help you to know, just by way of background, that over the course of my public service career as an elected official, I have been a locally elected school board member and president in Palo Alto, then the mayor of Palo Alto, then a county supervisor here in Santa Clara County, then a member of the state assembly up in Sacramento, then a member of the state senate in Sacramento, and then when I was termed out, I came back to the county where I am now a recycling county supervisor and currently serving as chair of the board. I tell you that because what it means is that over the years, I've had a tremendous opportunity to work with a great many advocates. I think I have developed some sense of what works and what doesn't, and of course we're going to try and highlight what works. Just so you know, I have also been, just like all of you, sitting in a chair like the one you're sitting in right now, being a community advocate back in the day before I became an elected official. So I have been on both sides of the dais, both sides of that podium, and I have some empathy for all of you who are trying to have some impact in the process. Now, a couple quick questions to get us started. I want to make sure I have your geographic and political boundary frame of reference in mind as we have this conversation. So, how many of you live in the city of San Jose? Show of hands. I'm guessing it's most. Okay. For those of you who do not, just shout out where you're from.
Santa Clara.
Santa Clara and?
Sunnyvale.
And?
Sunnyvale.
And?
Burlingame.
Say again?
Sunnyvale County.
Okay, unincorporated county and? Los Gatos. Anywhere else that we missed?
Burlingame.
Okay, great.
Wow.
Any place else?
Gilroy.
Gilroy, wonderful, good. All right, now we're going to jump right in, and again, just go with me if you would, please. So, how many of you in the room have good values? Show of hands, please. I'm a little worried about this section over here where that hands are too busy eating. All right, good, fair enough. All right, second question. How many of you have been disappointed at some point that your government at some level has not reflected or respected your good values? Show of hands. Now everybody's hand is up. All right. That is the reason for this conversation. The goal, as I say, is to make all of us in the room more effective advocates. There are 13 tips. I have taken what I have learned over the years and tried to put them on a one-page handout for you all. It's a little disconcerting to realize that, all these years later, everything I know can be on one sheet of paper, but the goal was to make this simple and, again, give you a handout as it goes around the room. So we're going to jump right in with the very first tip. Develop a relationship before you arrive. A year, an hour, or even a 15-minute phone call. All right, what is this about? Here's what it's about. Let's use a practical everyday example, and my feelings won't be hurt on this one. How many of you would not recognize me as either County Supervisor Joe Simitian or former State Senator Joe Simitian? If you had not met me tonight or seen my face on the flyer, how many of you simply would not recognize me? Okay, so ma'am, your name is? Mary. Mary? So let's imagine that it's a weekend. Let's imagine that I'm not in my standard uniform of the gray slacks and the blue blazer. I'm in my blue jeans and I'm working to clean out the garage and I got a t-shirt on and I haven't shaved because that's one of the great liberations of a weekend. And I'm at the gas station and Mary's getting gas, putting it in her car. I would like to do the same, and I realize, oh my God, I've left my wallet at home. And I walk up to Mary, who doesn't know me, and I don't know her, and I say, ma'am, excuse me, I am so embarrassed. I have left my wallet at home. My car is running on fumes. I got to get to a thing. If you could lend me $20, now you should see the look on her face already. But if you could lend me $20, I promise. Oh, and by the way, you give me your name and your address and your phone number, I will send you the $20. Now, listen to how you're reacting. Look at how she's reacting. Let's just say she's not exactly leaning in at the moment. All right. On the other hand, your name is Christine. And if I say, Christine, how are you? She's great. I am so embarrassed. I have left my wallet at home, and I got to get some gas. And I got to get to a thing. Could I borrow $20 from you? What are you going to say, Christine?
Sure, I know where your office is.
That's right. Now, she gave away a little bit of that answer, didn't she? Sure, I know where your office is. In other words, she and I have enough of a relationship from having worked together on issues in the county. It's not like we go out for, a glass of wine together. We don't. It's not like we've ever dined with each other, except maybe at a community luncheon once or twice, but we've worked with each other. She knows me well enough to know that if I say I'll pay her the $20, I'll pay her the $20. She also pointedly reminded us that she knows where my office is, and if I don't pay her the $20, she can find me at my office. And she knows that I'm an elected official, and if I don't pay her the $20, she can badmouth me to my constituents. These are all things she knows because we have a relationship. So if you're an advocate, in this case just for the $20, and you have no relationship at all, your chances are much reduced as compared or contrasted with the advocate that has some kind of a relationship. Now, let's take it to the city council level, and I'm going to pop around from sample city to sample city, but how many of you have ever actually spoken at a city council meeting, a school board meeting, a planning commission meeting, a board of supervisors meeting? Okay, probably better than half. Good. I want you to think for a minute, and truly do this. Think for a minute, the very first time you ever did that. First time, you probably remember you walked up to a podium and there was a microphone, and as you're walking up, you may remember that the people behind the dais, and you notice how the dais is always raised, so you have to look up to the elected officials. That is not by accident, I can assure you. So you're looking up, you're probably a little nervous, and as nervous as you are, you may be even more nervous when you see heads turn, and you'll see one member of the city council say, "Psst," and you're wondering, what are they saying to each other? I'm going to tell you what they are saying to each other. They're saying, who is that? I don't know. Do you know who that is? I don't know who she is. Do you know who that is? Why is she here? What does she want to talk about? And if you think about it, it makes sense because as nervous as you are, they're even more nervous because they have to stay there and take whatever it is you're about to say. You can just walk away at the end of your 3 minutes and leave. And here's the thing. Very rarely do strangers come to a city council or a school board meeting and say, thank you for the really good job you've done, or really want to compliment you on the way you carried out that last conversation. People show up unexpectedly to complain, to demand things, to ask for things. So as nervous as you are, they're even more nervous because if they don't know you, they're anxious, maybe even a little afraid. But imagine how differently that first conversation goes if you have developed some kind of relationship. And again, maybe it's not someone you've known or worked with for years. Maybe you've just said, you know, I could pick up the phone and call and talk to that council member or school board member. Or if it's somebody who has full-time staff, to talk to their staff. Christina Loquist from my office, for example. Thank you for being here tonight, Christina. And you could at least begin the development of a relationship so that if you're walking up to that microphone, when the heads turn, who's that? I don't know who that is. Oh, I know who that is. That's the woman I spoke to earlier today. She had some very good ideas. I'm glad she's here tonight. And now there's a gentle ripple up and down the dais that is welcoming rather than exactly. So try to develop that relationship. If you've known somebody and worked with them for years, great. If you haven't, you can have a cup of coffee before the meeting, great. If it's just a 15-minute phone call, better than nothing. If it's a conversation with the staff, that's a good thing too, because let me tell you, what's going to happen if you have, let's say, a meeting scheduled, and when I was in the California State Senate and the meetings were coming thick and fast, and I'd be walking into my office after coming off the floor of the Senate, and I'd say, now who am I meeting with again? And I'd get a name from my staff person, and I'd say, and who are they again? And they'd tell me, and I'd say, and why are they coming again? And the answer would be, oh, you know, these are the people I told you about. We've been working with them over the last 3 months. They're really good. They've got some good ideas. You're going to enjoy working with them. That's because somebody has developed a relationship. Or I could hear from the staff member, boss, I have no idea. These people asked for a meeting 3 months ago. We said yes. We've reached out to them 6 times and we've never heard back, which is not the way to build a relationship, is it? So you want to build that relationship before you arrive so that the conversation gets off to the right start. Whether it's a meeting in the elected official's office, you want to have already built the relationship, or whether you're coming to the microphone, but you don't want to show up cold if you can possibly avoid it. Which takes us to tip number 2, which is understand what motivates your audience, meaning the elected official, the member of the Senate, or the member of the Assembly, the member of the City Council, or his or her staff. Understand what motivates your audience, and then tell them why they care, not why you care. That's why I asked, how many of us have good values? And we all thought we did. But if you march up to the microphone and you speak only from the place of your head and your heart, then you're pretty clearly not thinking about, but what's in his head and his heart? What's in her head and her heart? How do I motivate them if they're motivated by different things? So ask yourself, what motivates them? So if, for example, let's go to Palo Alto, where I'm from, and you've got a 9-member city council. Until recently, now it's 7 members. But I was on the council when it was 9 members, so let's call it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 council members. And you want to open a recycling center, and you want support for your recycling center. Okay. So you're there because you're passionate about the environment. Well, that's great. But if I've got 9 members, how many members do I need to help me? At least 5. Exactly. Simple majority. All right. Now, that means I have to ask myself, not what motivates me, which is my passion for the planet, but what motivates them. And I may be off to a good start because I happen to know that at least 3 of the council members, 1, 2, 3, are greenies. Good. They're on my team. But I need at least 2 more votes. Where are they coming from? And then I remember, oh yes, council member, your name again?
Laura.
Laura, she's all about the kids. She's all about the schools. And that's why I'm going to mention that it's not just an environmental recycling center. It's got a great program for after-school participation by young people at our 3 high schools. And now you're seeing the nodding and smiling I'm getting from council member Laura, because I may be thinking of it as a program that's all about green, but now we've got her thinking about this as something that's good for the kids in the community. And then I remember council member Karen, who is the crusty fiscal conservative on the city council. Okay, So that's why I want to make sure that as I'm pitching it as green and I'm pitching it as being for the kids, I'm also reminding the fiscal conservative on the council. And by the way, you could see this as an expense, which she does, but you could also see it as a cost-saving measure because, the tipping fees are going up. We're paying more and more every year to dump our garbage because of the shortage of landfill space. And if we could just get our recycling program up to the standards where we want it to be, we wouldn't have to pay for all those tipping fees. And by the way, we wouldn't have to pay to ship our garbage halfway to Gilroy and back. And by the way, we'd actually get paid for the recyclables, so we'll have some income coming in. And now if you look at her, she is nodding and smiling because I'm talking her fiscally conservative language. So now we've got, how many votes?
5.
Because we weren't just talking about what motivated us, me, the 1, 2, 3 Greens. We're also talking about, after asking the question, what motivates them, these other council members. Now look, sometimes you have to ask yourself what motivates somebody, and you may come to the conclusion that they're not motivated by policy. And it may be that I have to say to Council Member Robert, Council Member Robert, look, we're doing the ribbon cutting in late October, and I know that's a busy time for you because you're up for re-election in the first week in November. But if you see where I'm going, but if you could come to our ribbon cutting the last week in October, again, I know it's busy a week before your election, and perhaps say a few words to the 300 of your local residents who we expect will be there. And by the way, I know it's an imposition, but if you could give us an extra half an hour to talk to the press that's going to be there, because we have 3 cameras and 2 radio mics and 4 or 5 print reporters. And again, I'm sorry to burden you with this, but if you could just come and spare that time. Now, am I appealing to policy? No. Am I appealing to what I happen to know matters to this particular council member? Absolutely. Nothing wrong with that. If that's what it is, that's what it is. And you have to ask yourself, what is it that motivates? And look, this will surprise many of you, but it's been my observation that some elected officials have ego needs. Just some. And so it may be that what is persuasive with a particular council member, let's say it's Council Member Hanson. Council Member Hanson, everybody tells me you're the one they all listen to.
I've known that.
With the humility that is the hallmark of our elected officials. If that's an appeal that will work with her, we have to ask ourselves, is that an appeal we can make in good conscience? We don't want to be disingenuous. But if that's what motivates her, tip number 2 is a reminder, we have to ask ourselves, what motivates the folks you're trying to persuade, and then tell them why they should care. If we only talk about what motivates us, then we're only going to persuade ourselves and those who are like-minded. The goal here is to bring new folks to the cause, whatever the cause may be. Tip number 3, understand what is possible and what is not. So one way to be disappointed, if you are an advocate, is to ask for things that people just can't do. Now, I'm not talking about defying the laws of physics here. I'm talking about there really are some things that people can't do. So a sort of a threshold question, you're going to think this is a little silly perhaps, is what time is it, for example? And the answer is 7:30. All right, so the threshold question might be, is it legal? Because if you're asking people to do something that's not legal, that's going to be a problem for them and for you. And I actually had personal experience with this when I was in the state legislature. For 11 of the 12 years I was there, I had an annual contest called There Ought to Be a Law. And I invited my constituents to suggest proposed legislation. And by the time we got done, gosh, we had 400, 500 proposals a year. But we had to let a lot of folks know, initially by phone and later by email, that, gee, I'm sorry, it's a great idea, but it's unconstitutional. Or, gee, it's really appealing, but the federal government has preempted, meaning taken responsibility for it and precluded others for acting in that field. It's literally illegal to do what you're proposing. Or, is it just financially totally out of the question? And I'm not saying don't stretch, but I had the challenge of being in the state legislature when we were obliged to cut $20 to $30 billion a year during the Great Recession. Well, I had a lot of great suggestions for improving education if we just had an extra $3 to $5 billion a year. Well, you're not going to find a $3 to $5 billion solution when you're cutting 20 to 30 billion out of the budget. Doesn't mean you couldn't propose a pilot project for a couple $100,000, demonstrate proof of concept, come back when the budget's better. But people were frustrated when they asked for things that I tried to be candid with them and say, it's just a non-starter. Or maybe it's a political non-starter. You might go to council member Mark, and he might have to tell you, you know, I've introduced that every year for the last 7 years, and I keep losing 8-1 on my Palo Alto City Council. And, you know, doing it again is just bumping our head into the wall for no good purpose. So ask yourself, is it legal? Is it realistically possible from a financial standpoint, from a political standpoint? And one of the challenges in California in particular is, I don't know if you've noticed this, but government here is complicated. They have a lot, I'm not being flip. There are 58 counties, there are 500 plus cities, there are 1,000 more or less school districts, there are thousands of special districts. So an important question, and then within each body, there are all kinds of places you could go to try and get what you want. So you have to ask yourself, am I asking the right people for the thing I want help with? And I had this experience many, many years ago. There's a great little children's theater in Palo Alto, and it's a lovely old building, but it's a lovely old building. So it was an unbelievably hot summer's day, and the kids are up on stage, and the proud parents are all in the audience, and you're watching the kids, and it's so hot that the kids' makeup is literally dripping down their faces. And the parents are all doing this because it's hot. And as we're walking out, people turned to me and said, Joe, for God's sake, you're on the school board. Can't you do something and get us some air conditioning? And I said, well, you're talking to the wrong guy because this is a city facility and I'm on the school board, so I can't help you with that. Now, the punchline to the story is I was later on the city council, and today there is air conditioning at the Palo Alto Children's Theater. But in the moment, you have to ask yourself, am I in the right place talking to the right people who can actually help? Am I standing in front of the Public Safety and Justice Committee when I should be in front of the Health and Hospitals Committee for some reason? Maybe I am, in which case I better get myself to the other committee. Again, ask yourself what's possible and what's not, and make sure that it is legal, politically practicable, fiscally possible, and that you're in the right place talking to the right people. Which takes us to tip number 4, which is find a floor manager. Now, what does this mean? Well, this is a term of art in the legislature. So if I was in the state Senate and I had a Senate bill and I got it passed, 25 to 15, it has to go in California to the other house of the legislature, which is called the Assembly. And I have to have somebody over there carry the bill because I'm a senator and I don't get to go present bills over in the Assembly. Which means I need to ask one of the Assembly members, Assembly Member
Kurt?
Patrick, to be my floor manager. And he will literally be the person who stands up on the floor of the California State Assembly and presents my bill. And you work hard to make sure you have a good floor manager because you don't want to take all your hard work, hand it to somebody who's not a good floor manager and have them mangle your bill on the floor, which is why I went to Patrick, because I know he knows what he's doing and he'll do a good job of representing the bill on the floor. But why am I telling you this, since none of you, as my knowledge, are on the Assembly floor or on the Senate floor? And the reason is, as a community activist and advocate, when you give something to somebody, you want to make sure that they're ready to take it up, that somebody there is an advocate for your point of view. We think if we take these very complicated issues and just throw them up to the 5-member school board or the 7, 9, or 11-member city council, that somehow it's all going to just get sorted out. But these are challenging issues, and it's hard to get folks to sort them all out, particularly given the volume of work they've got, and particularly given the fact that nobody knows your issue as well as you do. That's why it's your issue. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to do something, and it's going to seem silly, but bear with me, you'll figure it out right away. Let's go to San Jose, where there are how many people on the city council? 11. 10 plus the mayor is 11. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now, before the council meeting starts in the evening, we need to get them a quick bite to eat, because they're going to go into closed session, and they're going to talk about litigation, property matters, labor relations. These are all things that can properly be done in closed session, and we're going to get them, as they say, something to eat, and we're trying to be careful with the taxpayers' money, so we're just going to get them pizza. Is that okay?
Yep.
So, first decision of the evening is, what kind of pizza would you like?
Pepperoni's fine.
Pepperoni's fine, says the council member. Okay, council member?
Some are vegetarian.
Vegetarian. Okay. Combo. Clearly not the fiscal conservative. She wants it all. Okay. Council member?
I hate pizza.
I hate pizza. Let me just tell you, every council has one of these people on it, right? So, and you?
Fried chicken.
Thai chicken pizza.
Meat lovers.
Meat lovers.
A lot of anchovies.
A lot of anchovies. Okay.
Combo.
Combo.
Gluten-free.
Gluten-free. Combo.
Pineapple and ham.
Really good.
Well, you see the problem. And I mean no disrespect to the council members, but the issue that is important to you is about to go to a group of people who can't even order a pizza for dinner. But actually they can if somebody leans in and is the floor manager and says, wait a minute, let me see if we can't sort this out. First of all, who said we had to split just one extra large pizza? We could get 2 large pizzas or 3 medium pizzas. And by the way, they will put half and half. And by the way, bring your own anchovies. And you can work it out. This is not that big a challenge. But my point was just, if you say, hey, how hard could it be to order pizza? Had everybody fill out a piece of paper saying, here's what kind of pizza they want. All of a sudden you think you have a challenge. And the challenge is a solvable one, but somebody has to be that somebody. So now let's make it real and tangible and important to you. So let's say that, and I'm going to give you names. We've got Nancy the neighbor and Dave the developer. And Dave the developer proposing a 222-unit condominium project. And it happens to be in Nancy the neighbor's neighborhood. Now Dave the developer knows this project inside and out because he spent 3 years trying to get it through the process. He's got every penny he's got and probably some he borrowed into the project. And this is do or die for him. On the other hand, Nancy the neighbor has lived in the neighborhood for 30 years. She knows the neighborhood better than almost anyone. She's concerned about development in her neighborhood. And guess what? This issue is going to be resolved by the 11 people who couldn't order a pizza. Yeah, not making you feel very comfortable, is it? So, here's what happens. The item comes to the council. They're tired, they're grumpy. All they've had for dinner was a lousy pizza. And this is the scariest part of the meeting. For both Dave the developer and for Nancy the neighbor and for everybody who is interested in the outcome. And it's when the mayor says, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That completes the public hearing. The public hearing is now closed and the matter is back before the council for debate, deliberation, and possible action this evening. That is parliamentary speak for sit down, be quiet, we've heard from you, it's our turn now. And it means you are out of it. It's in the hands of these 11 people. And here's what's going to happen, and you've all seen it. Right out of the bat, Council Member Susan is going to say, Mr. Mayor, I am very concerned about the 2,200 trips that this project is going to generate. And Dave the developer is just about out of his seat because he knows that it's 220 trips. And he starts to come up towards the microphone and the mayor's shaking his head like, no, you cannot come. And Dave's like, what do you mean I can't come? I can't correct. It's saying 2,200 when it's really 220. She's off by a factor of 10. And fortunately, Dave, the developer, found his floor manager before the meeting. That was council member Trish, who's a housing advocate. And Trish has done her homework. And she says in her politest voice, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I think if the council member will look at the first sentence of the first paragraph on the first page of the staff report, she will see that it's only 220 cars, not 2,200 cars. And that's when Dave, the developer, is thinking, hot damn, I got myself the right person to be a floor manager. But Nancy, the neighbor, this is not her first neighborhood battle. She's also gotten herself a floor manager. That would be council member Ron, who leans in and says, you know, Mr. Mayor, that was a helpful clarification, but my recollection is that the TDM program, the Transportation and Demand Management Program, supposed to limit this to 220 cars, is an approach we tried on a half a dozen other projects with minimal, if any, success. I wonder if we could ask the planning director to come back up here and tell us how that's worked. And all of a sudden the planning director is at the microphone talking about how the TDM programs have never delivered as promised. And that's when Nancy, the neighbor, is thinking, ha-ha, I also had a floor manager, and my floor manager is even smarter than your floor manager is. You need somebody to know your project, know your issue, be able to make your arguments, be able to ask the questions, actually have read the staff report. You're going to know, and the activists among you have probably already seen this, you know, when someone leans forward and says, I think if you'll look at page 22 of Appendix B in the footnote down at the bottom, that isn't somebody who just stumbled across that information in the moment. That is somebody who was probably approached in advance, totally appropriately, and asked, will you please be on top of this for us? It matters. And there are legitimate competing interests here. We're pro-housing, but we're pro-neighborhood, and we're concerned about traffic. Okay. But if somebody up here hasn't taken the responsibility to understand, to advocate, to question, to do the homework, we can't be surprised that somebody's going to offer an off-the-cuff observation that's wrong and it goes uncorrected. And he's got his life savings in this project. She's got her whole home and the security of her family at risk. You need to find a floor manager, someone who, and they don't have to agree with you 100%, but if you just toss the item up and hope for the best, you will almost always be disappointed. Which takes us to tip number 5. Right after 4 comes 5. And now there's a little pop culture quiz here. I call this the Joe Jackson principle. How many of you, if any, are familiar with singer-songwriter Joe Jackson? A few. Okay, well, I'm not quite as out of touch as I thought. Joe Jackson, British singer-songwriter. My own personal favorite of his is a song called You Can't Get What You Want Till You Know What You Want. Some of you know the song. You can't get what you want till you know what you want. That is tip number 5. You got to ask yourself before you walk in the room, what do I want? And then you have to tell them. And as I mentioned earlier, I've been in 5 different venues now where I have listened to people over the years, and they come to the microphone, and they may be angry, they may be sad, they may be passionate, they may be in tears, but they talk for their 2 or 3 minutes, whether it's, you know, at the local level, the state level, they go back to their seat, and it's the saddest thing in the world because you're sitting there thinking, I have absolutely no idea what they want. You have to be sure, if you're going to be an effective advocate, that you know what you want, and then you tell them. What do you want? So if it's Nancy the neighbor, and she walks up to the microphone and says, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, traffic's already dangerous in our neighborhood, semicolon. So either fix the traffic problem with this project or deny it, period. How long did that take? 10 seconds? 15? But we know what she wants. Fix the traffic problem or deny the project. Now, if she wants to spend the next 2 minutes and 45 seconds telling us about the little boy who was almost hitting his bicycle last week? And if she thinks that's a good and compelling story, she's got the time to do it. But only after she has told us what she wants. Or, and we get this a lot in Silicon Valley, if she's got binders full of data and wants to tell us, you know, traffic's gone up by 28.4% over just the last 6-month period, and it's like, great, you've got time to do that. But you don't want the elected officials silently to say to themselves, so what? You have to know what you want, and you have to tell them. And, you know, I'm looking at what's great about this group is there's a diversity of backgrounds and ages and all of that. But how many of you remember from high school English something called topic sentence? Seriously, topic sentence. I'm not asking you to diagram a sentence, I'm just asking about topic sentence. Ask yourself before you walk up to the microphone, what's my topic sentence? My topic sentence is, hey, traffic's already lousy, so we either fix the traffic or deny the project. That's my topic sentence. Okay? And just, you know, this will perhaps surprise you. This is a challenge for even skilled professionals. Because we're so wrapped up in the thing that is our passion that we forget that we don't tell them, they don't know, and we have to be clear about what our ask is. Because, and this is a phrase that people will use. Christina Loquist worked with me when I was in the state legislature. And she got used to me saying, what's their ask? Meaning, what is it they want to ask me when they come? So I can think about how I can be helpful. But I had professional lobbyists, and some of you will know this, but there are literally 1,000 registered lobbyists in California for the 120 state legislators. So there's 8 lobbyists for every legislator, more or less. And they would come to the office, and you'd be 20 minutes into a 30-minute meeting. And again, these are professionals, they're well compensated, and if 20 minutes in, you're looking at the highly paid lobbyist whose name is Ray. And you have to say, Ray, it's so good to see you again. And how can I help you? That's code for, Ray, you've been here 20 minutes, we're almost out of time, what on earth do you want? You don't want to be in that position. So if Ray has walked in and said, hi, Senator, good to see you. I'm here to ask for your yes vote on Senate Bill 123 next week in the Energy Committee. It's a renewable energy bill, and I know that's a passion of yours. He's used up 15, 20 seconds, but I know what the next half hour is about or should be about. He wants me to be for a renewable energy bill, and he doesn't want me to just be for it. He wants me to vote for it, and he doesn't want me to vote for it someday. He wants me to vote for it in the Energy Committee where it's coming up next week. Now, I know what his ask is, and we can have the conversation about why it's a good bill, or who the author is, or who the supporters are, or why it's approved. But I know what he wants. Because he's asked himself before he walks into the room, what do I want? And then he's told me, I want your vote, and I vote in committee on SB 123 next week. Okay, I got it. Tip number 6, bring solutions, not problems. And then there's a little parenthesis that says, can you find interest group agreement? All right, so how many of you have heard candidates for office say, elect me, I want to tackle the tough problems of our time. I want to challenge, right, okay, fine. How many of you think they really want you to present them with tough problems? Who would? I mean, that's just not a rational thing, right? Like, sure, I got up this morning and I thought, I hope people bring me real thickets. You know, I don't do that. So you don't want to be that person. You want to be the person that shows up with a solution. You want to have done your work so that instead of showing up in council member, tell me your name again? Karen's office saying, oh, Karen, I've got this hellacious problem and I want you to wade right in. And by the way, half the town will be mad, the other half might be okay with it, but, you know, wouldn't you like to be beaten bloody about the shoulders as, you know, a result of doing the right thing? Because, you know, I did walk 2 precincts for you, even though I was recovering from knee surgery, and I did write a second check. That would be wrong to talk about, by the way. But even though, you know, my spouse had been unemployed for 6 months, but I know you're a person who would do the right thing. Don't you want to jump into this thicket and make everybody? No, she doesn't. And if she's foolish enough to do it once, she'll never do it a second time. So you want to show up and say, Karen, you are
really doing just the job we all hoped you would. You know, you'll remember that neighborhood issue that we had that we talked about during the campaign. Well, I want you to know we've spent the last year working in the neighborhood to sort it out. We've had a series of house parties and couch conversations, and we think we've developed some consensus on this. And in fact, we have a petition signed by 92% of the residents of the neighborhood. And now here's what Karen is thinking. I could make 92% of the people happy. And then you go on to say, and all we really need is an overlay zone on our zoning map. And if you could do that, that would help us solve the problem because we spent the year organizing people into building consensus. Now she's interested because you've done your part and you've brought her a solution, not a problem. People want solutions, not problems, and they don't want to jump into the middle of your problem if there isn't a solution apparent. That being said, let's go on to tip number 7, which is to describe the elements of a solution rather than insist on your solution. What is that about? In labor relations, we might call this interest-based bargaining, which is, hey, if you say we can give 0, we demand 20%, well, now you're at a point of conflict. If, on the other hand, it's labor and management, you're sitting down at the table saying, is there some way our interests might align? Well, if you're management, you're thinking, gee, I'd like to be able to attract and retain qualified people. If you're labor, you might be thinking, gee, we'd like to be able to afford to live in this community. Okay, now we're talking about something where we have some overlapping interests, aren't we? And there's more than one way to solve a problem. When I was a new legislator, one of the sayings that was common was, don't fall in love with your bills. Now, I fell in love with all of my bills because I was pretty sure all of my bills were perfect because they were Joe Simitian bills. I was quickly disabused of that notion. And what I learned is there are other ways to solve a problem than the first idea you had on how to solve a problem. And that might make it easier to get the 21 votes you need in the Senate or the 41 votes you need in the Assembly. Or it may be that there's a way to do it cheaper or better or faster. But if you come in and insist on your solution and your solution only, you are narrowing the options. You are making it less likely that you're going to find someone who will be an advocate and supporter of your solution. And I actually had a very simple one many, many years ago when I was on the city council. Guy comes into the chambers, and he does know exactly what he wants, and he tells us, so he's got that tip down. He says, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I want a traffic barrier in front of my house. And I remember thinking in real time, really? You got up this morning and thought of like a big, ugly hunk of concrete in front of my house with sticks coming out of it on both sides, so traffic. And, you know, some of you were scrunching your faces like, well, who would think it? No. Turned out when you pressed a little bit and asked him what's his interest, what's his concern, that he lives in a neighborhood like Nancy the neighbor does, where there's too much traffic, going too fast, a lot of young families moving into the neighborhood, a lot of kids, worried that one of them is going to get hurt. And so he's looking for a solution for somebody who can address his interest in traffic safety. And he thought that he was coming with a solution, but when he says traffic barrier, and that's what he wants, and for those of you who are either historians or of a certain age, this is what in the 60s was referred to as a non-negotiable demand, the way he laid it out. It's like, well, then what are his chances? He's either going to get a thumbs up or a thumbs down, right? It's a binary choice, yes or no. That's a very limited set of options. And so if there's any good reason why a barrier wouldn't work, couldn't work, shouldn't work, he's done. But what if he says, like Nancy the neighbor, I'm concerned about traffic safety in my neighborhood, particularly for young families with kids. Are there some ways we might address that? Are there ways we might address that? Are there ways besides the traffic barrier? Of course there are. Shout some out. A stop sign. A speed bump. A roundabout. What else?
Speed limit change.
Change the speed limit. What else?
No left turn onto the street.
No left turn onto the street. What else? A dip. Okay. Now, here's my point. I don't think any of you are professional traffic engineers. And you hadn't given this any thought before tonight. But in literally 30 seconds, we had half a dozen other ways we might get to yes. If we spend another couple minutes, there'd be a dozen. And a dozen different ways to get a good answer is a whole lot better than just one with a thumbs up, one's down. You want to multiply your chances of getting someone to respond to you successfully, because you don't want to insist on your solution. You want to talk about what your concerns are, what your interests are, describe the elements of the solution. So that's why, Mr. Mayor and council members, we're looking to the council to do something on our street that will help keep these kids and their families safe. And we've opened up a whole range of possibilities. Now, this is the only one where I'm going to count to 3 and ask everybody to read along with me. So this is tip number 8. Take a look. I'll count to 3. 1, 2, 3. Do not chastise, insult, or threaten the member or his or her staff. All right. So you chuckle and you think, well, surely nobody would do that. And let me assure you, somebody will, somebody does. And the reason we have this tip, and I want to be really clear about this, is not because I am your mother or your father or Miss Manners or Emily Post, for those of you who know who I'm talking about. I'm not here to tell you how to be a good person. I wouldn't presume to do that. That is not why I was invited. I was invited because we want to talk about how to be a successful advocate. And what I want to tell you is, if you break this rule, you will be less successful. And I'm going to give you some very tangible examples that I have observed over the years. My personal favorite, because I was a school board member for 8 years, is the person who comes up to the podium at 1:45 in the morning, looks at the 5 board members, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and says, well, you people, now this is never a good start to the conversation at 1:45 in the morning. It starts with you people, it's going south in a hurry. But the rest of it is, you people obviously don't care about the children. Now, I can tell you what the 5 school board members are thinking. In real time, they are thinking, really? Because it's 1:45 in the morning, and I could be home with my family. And by the way, this job basically doesn't pay. It might be a modest stipend. So I'm giving 20 hours a week of my life, times 50 weeks in a year is 1,000 hours, times 4 years in my term is 4,000 hours of my life to the children of this community and their schools for free, but I don't care about the children, says the person at the microphone who I don't think I've ever seen at a school event volunteering or helping in any way in all my years of activity. And here's the great irony. The next sentence from the same person is, and I want your help with, and here's the thing. You may have noticed they're leaning back, they're not leaning in. Well, of course they're leaning back. You pinned them to their chair at 1:45 in the morning. And the chances of getting help are not high. So the point here with this tip is, even if you believe you are right, it would be self-indulgent to chastise or insult or threaten the elected official or his or her staff. And I mention the staff because one of the things I've noticed is that some people think, well, I'll be nice to the elected official, but I can disrespect their staff. Well, that's, again, never mind being a good human being, that's just bad advocacy. Because those staff members play critical roles. You heard me say earlier, the staff member is going to be right by the side of the elected official when the elected official says, now tell me again who we're meeting with and what this is about. And if the staff member says, you remember, these are the folks I told you have been rude and swore at so-and-so in our office, well, that doesn't exactly tee you up for success. Or, and I happen to think this may be one of the worst jobs in public service, if you're the junior planner at the plan checking desk and you're trying to help people be successful moving through the process, and you've got a stack of work this high that you're trying to make your way through, and you've got somebody who just doesn't want to hear it, and all of a sudden he or she slams his hand down on the desk and says, I know the mayor. Here's what the junior planner is thinking. Junior planner is thinking, Good for you. Because you walk away, your application that had finally made its way to the top of the very tall pile, guess where it goes? To the bottom of the pile. Because the junior planner has people who want to get to yes to work with, and why is he or she going to spend time with somebody who is laying that on them? But it gets worse than that, because having dealt with that, how this cord goes, the junior planner is going to tell the senior planner, and the senior planner is going to tell the city manager, and the city manager is going to tell the mayor, and the mayor's going to say, I don't know that guy. And then the city manager and the mayor are going to be mentioning it to the council members. And so if you ever do get your project in front of these people, that well has been poisoned so badly, you don't even want to go near it. And that your chances have been reduced. All because you couldn't hold back that moment of anger or frustration, or because you were disrespectful and rude. And it's, a human emotion, I get that. But it is one that will not serve you well if you want to be an effective advocate. And again, as I say, remember the staff for the elected official, they need to be treated with the same courtesy and respect, because they are in a position to make decisions that will either help you along this path or keep you from making the progress you want to make. Which takes us to tip number 9, which is understand that sometimes less is more. This is one where the elected officials get to engage in a double standard. I'll just open that right up. So, if you've ever been to a school board meeting or a city council meeting or a board of supervisors meeting, you know that all but the final speaker has spoken. I mean, the member of the council or the member of the board. You get to the last member of the council, and the last member of the council says, well, it's really all been said, but, and then they go on to say this. Now, if you've already written this letter to, let's say, the council member in Sunnyvale, and we'll say, your name in the back, the woman around here? Nicole. So council member Nicole of Sunnyvale, you've sent her the letter already. Is there something else you could do with the letter?
Yeah. Call the office and say it's immediate.
Immediate, that's right. So you take the letter, and instead of addressing it to council member Nicole, who apparently seems a little embarrassed with her newfound fame as a council member. Suck it up. You'll get used to being a public figure, Nicole. All right. So now you're just going to write editor, and you're going to send it to the Sunnyvale Sun or the Mercury News. And since you wrote a couple of drafts, you might also give copies of your letter to your friend to put into the letters to the editor. And you might take one of your earlier drafts and give that to your friend Alex, who's going to send it in. So you've got 3 letters to the editor. And since you know that council member Nicole is an active member of what group, council member Nicole? Pick a group. The Sierra Club. You're going to call the Sierra Club program chairman and say, hey, we got a great issue for your program meeting next month. And here's how it's going to go down. Council member Nicole is going to get that letter in her council packet, but then she's going to get it at her home as well. And then she's going to get it at work, and she may or may not remember she's already read your letter, but she's thinking, oh, apparently there's something I should be paying attention to here. Then she opens up the Sunnyvale Sun and thinks, oh my God, the whole community is ablaze. And it's really you and 2 friends who know how to push the send button. Okay. And then she goes to the Sierra Club meeting where she thinks she's going to be surrounded by a bunch of her like-minded friends, only to discover that this issue has followed her to the Sierra Club. And now, you and your couple friends have made Councilmember Nicole think this is the most pressing issue of the day and she's got to get on it. Because you layered your campaign. You didn't rely on just one method of communication. And here's the thing. It's not additive, 1, 2, 3 is better than 1. It's more than that, it's better than that, because when Councilmember Nicole sees the letters to the editor in the newspaper, not only is she seeing the letter to the editor in the newspaper, she's reminded of the letter that she got in her packet. So you're getting a double count. And when she goes to the Sierra Club and hears the pitch, she's thinking, oh yeah, not only does this guy make sense, but this is the issue I read about in the newspaper and that I got the letters about. So it multiplies. And any of you who have ever noticed consumer advertising know they don't just advertise on TV, do they? They come at you at the radio. And then they're online. And my personal favorite from years ago, I remember standing on a street corner as a cab went by with an illuminated Snickers bar on top, and I thought, man, these people are serious about moving some Snickers. Because everywhere I went for a month, there was a Snickers ad, and I thought I was out on the street corner, and all of a sudden, there it was again. Layer your campaign. Come at them through all, and again, good news, bad news. Hold that thought, we'll get to the questions, I promise. Good news, bad news is, the good news is there are more ways to reach people than ever. The bad news is you have to go where people are, and that means you got to go a lot of different places. The days of saying, well, we'll put it in the newspaper, and maybe we'll get 1 or 2 TV stations to cover it, and then we're done. Not anymore. Not anymore. So layer the campaign. Tip number 11, and I call this the Woody Allen corollary. Some of you know that Woody Allen somewhat famously said that 80% of success in life is just, okay? The Simitian corollary is the other 20% is not going away until you got what you came for. This is a line of work in which, advocacy that is a line of work in which persistence pays off. If you let them outlast you, you lose. If you are persistent, you win. And one of the things I'll tell you, and it's a little known secret, but some of you in the room will have experienced this firsthand, you have no idea how often they will say yes just to make you go away. And you want to be that person. Politely, as I said earlier, respectfully, smartly, but you know, if you are not there, you will be punished by your absence. If you are in the room, if you keep, now, sometimes you think you're done and you're not. So let's say I got my 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 votes on that 9-member council for my recycling center, and they funded the program, and I'm happy as can be. Am I done? Because the funding is going to come up again when? Next year. And if I was successful, then a bunch of other people saw that I was successful, and your name is? Carter. Carter is thinking, well, hell, if he can get money from the city council for his recycling center, I can probably get some for my whatever center. And all of a sudden he's down there, and if I'm not there because I haven't been persistent, he's running off with what I thought was my money. So I better stay involved, and I better be persistent. And if I only got half the money, because it was a tough year, then you know I'm coming back, because I'm going to be persistent. And if I'm working on, let's just pick a subject out of thin air, jail reform, and I know that it's an intractable problem, then I know that I got to work on it, and work on it, and work on it, because it's not going to solve itself by itself. And it's going to be a long haul. But if you walk away, the progress stops. If you stay engaged, you're probably going to be successful. And Dave, the developer, bad news for Dave, good news for Nancy. His project lost on a 5-4 vote. Is he done? No. He knows that persistence pays off. He is going to be back a year later asking for support for his new project. It will be new because he's going to paint it green instead of blue, which is what was going to be the last time. But he'll be down here being persistent, telling these folks, because he's looking for that one more vote to get over the hurdle. So persistence pays off. And I want to give you just a couple quick personal examples. And I'm going to point to my staff member because she knows, at least I think she does. So, well, before I ask her, how many of you know that it is against the law in California to hold a cell phone to your ear while you were driving your car? There you go. Anybody know who wrote that one?
You did.
Thank you very much. Or not, depending on your point of view.
Yay!
There you go. Someone who's never gotten a ticket, apparently. That's good. Right? Now, I should tell you, I introduced that bill in 2001, my very first year in the California State Legislature. Christina, did it pass in 2001? It did not. But I'm a persistent guy, so I tried it again in 2002. Did it pass in 2002? It did not. So I tried again in 2003. Did it pass in 2003? It did not. So I tried again in 2004. Did it pass in 2004? No. I tried again in 2005. Did it pass in 2005? No. Now at this point, my staff says, Joe, maybe you want to give it up because you start to look a little foolish. And I said, no, I think I'm going to keep trying because I think it's worthwhile. So I tried again in 2006. Did it pass in 2006? It did.
Gone.
You were gone. Yeah, that's the truth. Damn up. In 2006, we were successful on the 6th try. And here's what I want to tell you. The first year that law was on the books, fatalities in California dropped by 20% on California highways. 700 fewer people were dead. And to me, that is a sign that persistence pays off, right? I mean, it's about the same story with renewable energy. Some of you will know that we have a 20% and now 33% renewable energy requirement here in California by 2020. Just next year, we're supposed to have 33% renewable energy. I authored that bill in 2007 and 8. Couldn't get it out of the legislature. 2009, I tried for the 3rd year in a row, got it to the governor, and he vetoed the bill. 2010, I tried again, and I'm not making this up. The bill didn't get back to the Senate until 7 minutes before midnight, and it died on the floor of the Senate because we literally didn't have time to take the bill up in 2010. It passed the Senate, it passed the Assembly, back for final amendment concurrence, died with 7 minutes left to go. So in 2011, introduced the bill for the 5th time, and that was the year that good things happened. The bill was signed into law, and that's why we are now going to be at 33% renewable next year, and why we were able to then say, hey, how about 50%? And in fact, why don't we get to 100% carbon-free over time? But it wasn't because the first year everything went my way, or the 2nd year, or the 3rd year, or the 4th year. And I'm sharing these stories with you, not to brag on my work, because I often ask myself, would a better legislator have gotten them done more quickly? I'll never know. But to remind all of you that even if this is what you do on a daily basis, success is unlikely to come on your first outing, or even your 2nd, or your 3rd. So I don't want you to be impractical, but I want you to be determined and persistent, and remember that persistence pays off. Tip number 12, this one I'll make quick. Make it easy to say yes. Almost all of these tips are about making it easy to say yes. As I said earlier, if you ask for something that is illegal, you've made it hard to say yes, not easy. If you ask for a small fortune when there's no money, you've made it hard to say yes. If, let's see how this is taking you. You're the person who said, you're obviously in the developer's pocket, Councilwoman.
Hey, she doesn't like pizza.
So, if you're that person, have you made it easier or harder for her colleagues to side with you? You've made it harder, not easier, because they were all thinking, I side with that person, and I'm going to have to come back and work with my colleague every week for the next 4 years, and I need her vote. That's harder, not easier. You've made it harder to be a supporter, not easier. And my own personal experience, and it's a very simple and mundane one, but I think it helps make the point. My first year in the Assembly, we had some folks from the Peninsula or the South Bay who called and said, we'd like a meeting with then Assembly member Simitian on Monday afternoon at 2:30. Because we're going to drive 125 miles up and 125 miles back, 250 miles round trip. So, you know, we want a meeting. And my staff member had to very politely say, geez, I'm sorry, but we can't make that. Well, what do you mean you can't make it work? Well, we can't make it work because on Monday afternoon from 1:30 until 3:30, he's scheduled to be in the Transportation Committee. And by the way, he's also scheduled from 1:30 to 3:30 on Monday afternoon to be in the Revenue and Taxation Committee. And by the way, Monday afternoons from 1:30 to 3:30 he's also scheduled to be in the Utilities and Commerce Commission. And while we have been able to get him to all 3 places at once, we really can't do 4 places at once. It just doesn't work. We've tried. Now, they picked one time on one day, and that didn't make it easy to say yes. If they had been able to say, hi, we're coming up, and we just like a half an hour anytime between 10 and 6 on Monday or Tuesday, because we're going to spend the night, now have they made it easy to say yes? Yeah. And they've made it hard for me to say no. Because what are we going to do? Say, no, I don't have a half an hour for my own constituents who are prepared to drive 250 miles and have given me any time over 2 days when we could meet. So ask yourself, are you making it easy to say yes? And that takes us to the final tip, and the tip is number 13, the value of a thank you. Again, this is not about manners, and this
is not about being, nice. This is about being an effective advocate. All of us in the room are busy, and we have more good intentions than we have time, usually. But if you forget to say thank you, you will pay a price for that. So remember to say thank you. And, just, again, as an example, if I got the money for that recycling center, should I be saying thank you? You bet. Because, tell me your name again. Was it Carter?
Yeah.
Carter's coming to try and snake my money next year. And if I haven't said thank you to these people who had to disappoint Carter last year, my chances are going down. Similarly, Dave, the developer who's coming back, should he be sending a thank you note to the 4 people who supported his project, even though he wasn't successful? Yeah. Now here's the trick question. Should he send a thank you note to the 5 who didn't support his project?
Yes.
Absolutely. All the more so. And Dave, here's what it's going to sound like. Dear Council Member Karen, I want to express my thanks and appreciation for the care and attention you gave my project. It was clear from the thoughtful questions you asked that you had studied the matter carefully and cared deeply about the housing needs of our community and the well-being of the people that you represent. I was, of course, disappointed that my project wasn't worthy of your support, but I will take your constructive comments in mind when I submit my application the next time and hope that I have earned your support at that time. Thank you once again for your thoughtful consideration, Dave, the developer. Her heart is melting. She's feeling guilty that she voted against you. She's so impressed. Send the thank you note. Okay? If you don't send the thank you note, you can't be surprised that people don't feel appreciated, because the message you are sending is they don't feel appreciated. If someone got beaten about the head and shoulders for carrying your issue, and you don't say thank you, and you come back and say, hey, wouldn't you like to do that again? Then you can't be surprised that they're not that enthusiastic about it. And, it can be as quick as an email. The gold standard of thank you notes continues to be handwritten thank you notes if you can, find the time and send them in. Christina, who works with me in my office down at the County Government Center, I can spring this question on her, and I know that she knows the answer, which is, Christina, what's the one piece of mail that is always in my inbox?
Personal handwritten letters.
Right, and particularly the ones that say,
Thank you.
yep. I mean, look, you think the staff doesn't know that the thank you notes in his inbox, he'll be in a better mood? Of course they know that, right? That's the one piece of mail that I know I'm going to get. And again, if you don't say thank you, you can't be surprised. Now, apropos of the earlier conversation we had, is there someplace you could send the thank you note in addition to the elected official herself or himself?
Yeah.
All the same places before.
The staff, and what was one of the places we said before?
The board, home,
Newspaper.
the new media.
The media. Because I'm going to tell you something about elected officials and thank you notes. The only thing they like more than reading a thank you note sitting at their desk is reading a thank you note that is being read by tens of thousands of Mercury News readers, because they're thinking, well, not only is that a person who appreciated our work, but it's someone who is savvy enough to understand that they need to help share the good work we did if I'm going to be in a position to continue to do the good work. That's a partner that you want to keep partnering with. And I want to close with just one last example that I hope conveys the power of a thank you. And I got to go back a ways to my first time, Gabrielle, back in the day, in the late 90s when I was on the Board of Supervisors. And it was summer of 1999, and I had a chance to go as a volunteer with a group called IRC, the International Rescue Committee, to Albania and Kosovo. And some of you will remember there was just this horrible ethnic cleansing at the time, in the aftermath of the Balkan violence, and we had NATO bombing, and so there was a group from IRC that went to help with refugee resettlement, and I went as a volunteer with that group, and I was a ground level grunt. I was not, a big deal. I was just doing volunteer work for about 2.5 weeks in Albania and Kosovo, and I came back from the trip, and I was exhausted, and the staff in the office said, look,
we know you're beat, but there are a couple things that can't wait. One of them is you've been asked to speak for 2 minutes at the JCC, not in our town rally. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, while you were gone, there were anti-Semitic calls to the Jewish Community Center in Palo Alto. And so they're holding a rally, and the rally is to say not in our town. And there will be 12 speakers, and it's on Sunday afternoon from 1 to 3. And they'd like you to speak for 2 minutes as one of the speakers. Now, here's what I'm thinking. Truly, I'm thinking, oh, geez, I'm exhausted. I have just flown literally halfway around the world. I'm emotionally exhausted because of what I've just seen. Think of those waves of refugee pictures you saw in the news in the last few years. I'm thinking, you know, I'm going to be one of 12 speakers. And it's going to be for 2 minutes. And it's August, and it's in an old multi-purpose room, so it'll be hot, and people will be sweaty, and it'll be overcrowded, and we'll all be doing this, like I said earlier. And they say from 1 to 3, but you know, I've never been to a meeting like that didn't last an extra hour. And sure enough, the meeting runs from 1 to 4, and as I'm thinking about it, I'm just about to make a decision, and I say, you know what? Yeah, tell them yes, I'll go. And my wife was fine. I hadn't seen my wife for a full weekend in like a month, but she was fine. She said, I get it, honey, go. So I go. Not only does the meeting run long, 3 hours instead of 2, it is in fact as hot as I thought it would be. Turns out there are actually 13 speakers. I am number 7, right in the middle of the pack. I am preceded by Joan Baez. Yeah, so I'm trying to follow Joan Baez as among the speakers. But I do it, it's a good thing, I'm glad I went. Now, that's on a Sunday. 3 days later, on Wednesday, and this is how you know it was the 90s, I'm having just a horrible day. It's one of those days that we all have where you think, can nobody act right all day long? Like, what happened? Did everybody get up this morning and just decide to make life miserable? And I leave early for me. I'm a late night person, so I leave at maybe 5:30, which to me is really early. And as I say, you can tell it's the 90s because on my way home, I stopped by the video store. and I wander the aisles and I pick out the 2 most mindless videos I can find. I'm looking for 0 intellectual content. I want to just go home, put my feet up, forget the day. And I get my videos and I go to the counter. And there's like one guy working there, early 20s. And he's kind of got a punky look going on. He's got some spray painted hair and some piercings. But he's definitely not paying attention to anybody in the store. And I put my 2 videos down and they kind of rattle on the glass. And he still doesn't look up. He just says, name. And I say, Joe Simitian. And his head kind of pops up and he says, are you the Joe Simitian? Yeah, because it's not always a good question, right? So I'm a little flipped back and I say, well, you know, it depends. Which Joe Simitian are you asking about? And dead serious, he looks at me and says, the Joe Simitian who spoke at the JCC this weekend. And perhaps because I had stereotyped the young man a little bit based on his appearance, frankly, I was a little surprised and said, yeah, how do you know that? And he said, well, because I was there. I heard what you said. It mattered a lot. Thank you. And in that moment, without intending it, and probably without even realizing it, that young man made sure that if I was ever asked back again, I wouldn't hesitate for a minute to say yes. And that is the power of a thank you. Thank you all very much. I hope some of this has been helpful.